Hello, this is Paul Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Randy Goldsmith of Rapamycin. Randy, thank you for joining us.
I'm glad to be here, Hall. It's a great opportunity to join in.
Well, great. You've been in the industry for quite some time and have taken many a company to market and have helped many a company. Maybe give us a little bit of your background.
Sure. And what an adventure it's been. I started working in venture development and coaching in 1988. Initially with A&M projects, Texas A&M, working with their program, then with NASA, and then with various programs in Texas, Mississippi, and Oklahoma. Over the years now, I've engaged with over 1,000 entrepreneurs, all in the equity venture development class, and have helped a couple of hundred of them raise initial capital, and have seen some pretty exciting acquisitions along the way that were in the $200 to $300 million class acquisitions. It's been rewarding, and now I find myself on the other end, actually raising money for my own venture startup. So quite an experience, Hall.
Well, great. Well, you got a great deal going there, I hear, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how does one raise funding for therapeutics and devices? In the traditional angel world, they always ask the magic question, how much revenue traction do you have? But in the FDA validation world, you really can't use that. So how does one evaluate these startups to know how they put money in? And on the other side, how does someone in your position go about raising funding?
Good question. And it is very true that the therapeutic area is much different than your normal advanced technology startup with respect to funding. On a drug deal, I think most sophisticated investors know that the company must likely not get the revenue, with the idea being that once they get through a number of development stages and have de-risked the business model, that they'll be picked up by an acquisition from large pharma. And that's sort of the overall industry model where young companies will take the risk of the drug development and verification and validation, take it up to the point where it's demonstrating human safety and efficacy, and then position it for an acquisition that will take a couple more years to get to revenue for the pharma company, but generates an exit event for the investors at the point of acquisition. So the criteria typically is, what is the unmet medical need that this therapeutic solves? That's usually the first question. What does this drug do that no other drug does? Because like every other technology, if it's a Me Too technology in a crowded space, investors are not as likely to have an appetite for it. So answering that question, here's what our drug does that no other drug does that will differentiate it in the marketplace and excite the big pharma industry is question number one. Number two, how strong is the IP? How much other research is being done in the field, and is this IP protectable and defendable? And of course, that's pretty consistent across all ventures in the advanced technology space. So that is the key to the dance, if you will. Got to have that IP. And then how quickly and how efficiently can it be moved to market? Is there a clear path to market with regard to the FDA milestones that must be hit, as well as the efficacy and the safety of the product? So a whole different set of criteria and a much different timeline, and probably requiring patience from investors that may not be as anxious as others in other deals. So it is a different class of investor, I think, which is kind of unique.
Right, and most investors are looking for evidence of traction, momentum, progress, and so forth. And in software deals, you look at revenue, and in therapeutic deals, you look at other things. But it's sometimes opaque as to how they're doing with going through the FDA process. Is there a metric, or what does one look at to try to figure out if they're making progress in the proper way on time, or if they're not? Or is just everyone is just completely unique and unto itself, and you just have to know it very well? Or is there some other way to measure the progress?
No, I think your first observation is pretty correct. The FDA pathway from going from lab to eventual commercialization is a pretty well-worn path with pretty clear standard milestones that as a company takes the technology out of the laboratory, then the first step is a out of the lab validation of proof of concept. Usually it was originally validated in a rat model. We needed to take it up to a larger animal model to look at the pilot efficacy and safety to ensure that we've been able to translate that out of the lab. Once we have that, then we need to understand how the drug works in the animal and get some data, and quite a bit of data actually that shows what does it do when it's in the body and in the bloodstream. And all of that then compiles into what we call a pre-IND submission. We take all that data and informally go to the FDA and say, here's what we've got, here's what we intend to do. Does this look like it will meet your criteria? They'll provide some informal feedback. It's not mandatory, but nevertheless, if they give you feedback, you certainly want to be listening. That will then eventually lead to what we call a IND submission. IND is investigation new drug submission, and then that then lays out what you would call the FDA business plan of how you intend to move through a phase 1 safety study. And that clearly is a very significant milestone. So again, all of those milestones are laid out pretty well consistently over the years of how a company approaches the FDA, and that's the whole key is then to get clearance from the FDA to move forward into the clinic with your drug and start treating patients. And that consists of what we call a phase 1 safety trial first to ensure that it's safe, and then a pilot efficacy to demonstrate that it actually accomplishes the goal in a small population group suffering from whatever disease that you're proposing to target. So looking at that, usually a company will lay out those milestones and then carve up their raise targets to ensure that there's money being raised sequentially and at the right amounts to achieve those milestones as they march down that pathway.
Well, it seems like it takes quite a bit of money to bring a therapeutic all the way through the marketplace. What's your strategies for raising that money? It just doesn't seem possible to get there off of family, friends, or angel money. It's going to have to be other things, but how do you do that?
Well, in our case, I mean, it's sort of, and I've always looked at it that there's two approaches to it. One is to raise all the money you possibly can to do all that you need to do, and sometimes that's possible in other sectors, but it's pretty difficult in the therapeutic space. And it's much easier. Of course, nothing's easy, but it's more appropriate, I think, to identify what those key milestones that I was just speaking about and raise money in the appropriate tranches to raise money at the same time building enterprise value as you move through the process. So in our case, I've raised 4 rounds to get to the stage where we're standing on the threshold of moving into the clinic, and our fifth round will fund that clinic activity. So I raised an initial seed round, followed to basically achieve that first step that I mentioned before, moving it out of the lab into a larger animal, validating the technology, and then raise the next round to achieve our pilot safety study and efficacy study, and then so forth and so on. By being able to demonstrate to the investors that we're on target, we're on schedule, we're on budget, and we're on milestones. So that lays out for the investor from here's the big picture, then we break it down to the initial steps, and each time that we come back for a raise, that we can demonstrate that we've used the last round prudently to achieve significant milestones that built up shareholder value.
And some of them seem to go to pharmaceutical companies to get some of the funding. At what point do you go to them?
Well, it can depend, and of course I study that all the time to determine, to answer that question for ourselves. And if you have science that is in the lab that is demonstrated something that is a revolutionary, disruptive technology that no one has ever seen before, then that will immediately catch the attention of pharma, and they might be interested in immediately licensing that out of the lab before it even becomes a venture deal. And of course, if that happens, then typically, it's a straightforward deal between them and the university or the developing inventing institution. But more times than not, we like to see that spin out into a small venture like ourselves, where we can take some of the risk, develop that into, again, a good solid business plan. And I've seen companies acquired at a seed stage or any stage along the development pipeline. So it varies from company to company, and you never fully can appreciate what their motivation is. Sometimes they're looking for a technology that they can bring in-house and exploit because their competitors are looking at the same space or the same similar technologies. Like in the immuno-oncology field, there's a lot of excitement about that field, and companies are being picked up along the way, along the entire pipeline. So it can happen any time. The idea is to be prepared and ready to accomplish that whenever that event horizon jumps out.
And what's the role of grants? When do they come in, and how does that factor into it? Did you get any grants for your recent project?
No, we haven't. We will probably, when we finish our phase one, then we would probably if we don't have an acquirer on the horizon, then we would look for what we would call a company-sponsored, co-sponsored research grant, which continues to allow us to move forward with our development model. And or in the absence of that, we would move on to another round of funding. But again, looking for those sponsored research grants are always attractive, but you got to be careful in terms of when you get one of those grants, to be sure that it doesn't lock you into a relationship that you might not necessarily want.
What about corporate strategic funding? What are the issues there? If a pharmaceutical wants to invest, what are the questions you have to answer before you take that money?
Again, I think you would have to ask that question: Is this the right partner? Do they have the wherewithal to actually achieve the objective? Do they share the same development philosophy as we do, to be sure that we're not stepping into something that would tie up the technology in an effort for them to flip it versus them being interested in actually taking the drug to market. So, it's a one-on-one sit down, look each other in the eye, candid, honest, forthright discussion, and be sure that the vision and objectives align and that you trust each other and go forward from there.
Well, tell us about your current project, Rapamycin. Tell us more about what that's all about.
It's a fascinating drug. We're repurposing a drug that's 30 years old. It was initially discovered in the dirt on Easter Island by some research scientists that were doing an environmental survey for an airport that they were going to build on Easter Island. And they discovered in their analysis a unique, naturally occurring organism that created a drug that we now call rapamycin. It was initially discovered that it had application for fungus, and then eventually they discovered that it was an immunosuppressant, and they started using it for kidney transplant patients. And then in the 90s, they figured out, my gosh, this is a very unique drug that appears to control cell growth in all living organisms, and started looking at a multitude of applications. And probably there's been maybe 500 research projects done with the drug. And then the people out at the UT Hill Science Center in San Antonio at the Center for Longevity Studies were looking at it for life extension, and discovered that rapamycin was the first FDA-approved drug that would actually extend lifespan in a mammal. Well, that was the thing that caught my attention, and so I became interested in the drug and found out that it had multiple applications, everything from dementia to cancer to macular degeneration and so forth. So I set out to license that technology from the university, not knowing at the time exactly which field of use I would attack. And so once I was able to raise initial seed funding, we looked at several different disease indications, from cognitive impairment to cancer and autoimmune disease, and settled in on cancer, which was showing a very strong efficacy. And then along the way, in the last 2 years or so, researchers were able to identify that the drug actually in high doses is an immunosuppressor, but on the other end, in low doses, it's an immunostimulator. So we're interested in looking at the drug in cancer patients, and particularly initially in prostate cancer patients, to validate that the drug actually stimulates the body's immune system to actually help fight off the early stages and progression of prostate cancer. So that'll be our first indication that we will look at. And with success there, then we'll follow on with a study in bladder cancer, primarily again to target people who are on the early front end of the disease for purposes of preventing the progression to a later stage. So that's our plan currently, and where we stand. We're on the verge of submitting our formal IND submission to FDA, and are looking at treating patients in the first quarter of this coming year.
Did you take any secret money since it's in the cancer area?
Well, we talked with Secret. Felt like Secret was a good opportunity, but by virtue of the fact that we were an old drug from their perspective, and didn't offer a breakthrough by their definition. They didn't perceive us as a strong candidate. So that was okay. We were I think we had a productive exercise in working with Secret, particularly with their requirements on looking at the market opportunity, being able to provide them with the information that they requested. It was actually very constructive to our whole business process.
Well, great. Well, that's been very helpful in the description of investing and raising funding in the space. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn, website, or what's the best way?
All the above. My Rapamycin Holdings email is randy.goldsmith@rapamycinholdings.com. If they would like to talk to our CEO at Rapamycin, that would be Dan Hargrove, Hargrove, @rapamycinholdings.com, or they can reach me by phone at 210-478-8678.
Great. Well, we'll put those in the show notes for people that want to reach back out to you. There's quite a few people in the space raising money, investing money, and are looking for best practices, and those are certainly some of the better ones for sure. What else do we need to cover in the final minute we have here today's discussion?
Well, I think it's really interesting to see that the biomed sector is growing as quickly as it is in the San Antonio, Austin market. It takes the right kind of investors. So far, all of our money's been raised in San Antonio with local investors that really have confidence in our opportunity. Obviously, we'd like to see more of that in the Central Texas area, and I'd be happy to meet with and talk with any investors that are interested in that space. To provide whatever information that I can to help them make those decisions if they're interested.
We'll do so. Again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, Hall, I appreciate you inviting me to be on the program, and I wish best of luck to your listeners, whether they're investors or entrepreneurs. It's certainly an exciting world that we work in, and I wish them all the luck.
Very good. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Hall. Talk to you later.